Alright then gang, so the final component I want to show you is the tabs component. Now this didn't really fit into my design anywhere, so I've already made a new file called tabs.html just to demonstrate this and show you how it works. So inside this page I've boilerplated a new document with the CSS link at the top to our compiled CSS and the CDN to the JavaScript at the bottom of the body. So before we code anything, let's have a look at some of the examples of tabs on the documentation. So on the docs, it's under the navs and tabs section. And on that page, you'll need to scroll down a bit to see the tabs. So you can see that the tabs are a little bit like a nav bar with links inside them. And when we click on one of those links, it switches out the content underneath. You can also have a variation of this design using pills instead in the navbar section at the top. Just scroll down to have a look at that. So this does exactly the same as the other, but the design looks a little bit different. We're going to try and implement the first example we saw in our page. So let's go back to the HTML page, and you can see I've already created a container with some margin in the Y direction, and inside here is where we're going to create our tabs. Now the first thing we need is a nav for all of the little links in the tabs at the top, and inside the nav we're going to do a div with a class of nav, so it's styled as a nav but also nav hyphen tabs like so, and I'm going to give this an ID as well, nav hyphen tab. Now it doesn't have to be this ID. Bootstrap doesn't really use IDs to style anything, just classes. This is just an identifier and you can call it what you want. We'll also add the role, and that is going to be tab list. Okay, so inside this div right here, we need a series of buttons, one for each of the different links or tabs, if you like, at the top. So let me paste one in and just talk you through this. So we have the button and it has a class of nav link, and also this one is active. Now when it has an active class, Bootstrap styles it a little bit differently to show this is the active tab. You don't have to apply active if you don't want to, but by default I give one of them the active tab, the first one. So this has got an ID of nav home tab. It's got a data attribute which is saying toggle the tab, and also the target which is going to be nav home. Now I'm going to give something that ID in a minute. And also over here we have type equals button and a role equals tab and some ARIA controls, ARIA selected, etc. And that one says home. Okay, so this is for one piece of content. What we need to do though is copy that, or in fact I'll just copy a couple more from my repo and paste them in down below like so. So we have three buttons now. They all have the same classes except for active, only this one has active, but these two have a class of nav link as well, and also they have their own ID, profile and contact. They also have this toggle to say it's a tab, and they have the target to say which piece of content we want to show when we click on this button. So remember, the top one is going to be nav home, this one nav profile, and this one nav contact. So when we click on one of these buttons, Bootstrap is going to look for those IDs and show the content associated with those IDs. I hope that makes sense. Okay then, so that is the nav right here done. Now after that, we're going to do another div, and this div is going to be for the tab content. So div, and then a class of tab hyphen content like so. Now also, I'm going to give this an ID, and I'll set that ID to be nav and then hyphen tab content like so. Alright, and again, this ID can be whatever you want. Okay, so inside this now, we need our different bits of content that we're going to show when we click on these different buttons right here. So again, I'm just going to copy and paste a little chunk in and then explain it. So let me make some space and paste this in. We have a single div with a class of tab hyphen pane. So that is a Bootstrap class to style this. Also a class of fade. That means it's going to fade in and out when we show and hide it dependent on the tab we click on. By default, we give it this show and active class because we're showing these originally when we first go on the page, the same as this being active right here. And then we give it some padding as well. Now the ID is nav home, and remember that matches this thing right here, nav home. Okay, so when we click on that button, it knows to look for this div right here and show the content inside it. The role is tab panel, and then we have an aria labeled by to say what it's labeled by, and it's the nav home tab, which is this ID right here. So we're saying this button labels this content, and that's for screen readers, remember. And inside we just have some content, any old content, doesn't really matter. So we need 3 of these tabs. I'm going to paste in the other 2 as well, like so. So we have another one, tab-pane, fade, and p-3. This one doesn't have show or active though, because we're not showing those by default. The ID matches whatever the target is right here for the second button. And the labeled by matches this thing right here, the ID of the second button. Same for the third, tab-pane, p3, nav contact, which matches the target over here, I think. Yep, nav contact. And then we have the aria labeled by nav contact tab, which is this thing up here. Where is it? The ID right here. Awesome. Okay, so fingers crossed, this should all work now. If I come over to the browser and I can see the tabs, if I click on one of these, it swaps out the content. Awesome. So there we go, my friends. That is tabs in Bootstrap 5.